Before the first match of the Golden Gauntlet even begins, the meta's already taking shape, and the top competitive players and creators have already spoken. These are the decks they say that every player could bring. They're designed for anyone, even if you downloaded the game last week. In this video, I'm gonna break down the deck lists, the strategies, how to play them from the creators and the competitors themselves. And look, it doesn't matter if you've been playing a week or 2.5 years. Like some of us. Let's get you tournament ready. These are the best entry-level decks for the Marvel Snap Golden Gauntlet World Championship Series. But wait, first, before you do that, before the whole like and subscribe thing, because you already know that part, here was the challenge that I gave to these creators. I wanted them to build a deck that someone who's been playing the game for a very limited amount of time would be able to build based on their collection. So they had full access to all the entry-level cards up to Series 2, but then I had to throw a little bit of a curveball in there. No more than 4 Series 4 cards and only 1 Series 4 or 5 card. First up, we have Derek. Now, Derek was the winner from the first ever Golden Gauntlet, and under those same conditions, this is what he ended up with. It is a Moon Girl Victoria Hand deck. So the only Series 4 or 5 card in this one is going to be Victoria Hand, giving the +2 to all of those extra cards that end up in the hand via mechanics like Moon Girl, or getting a Mirage to bring a card over to your side, Agent 13 to bring a card into your hand that wasn't there before, and you can obviously reduce them down with cards like Quinjet. So you're building this double strategy of looking to ramp up points, whether it be put the Sunspot down, look to skip maybe turn 5 because you've got 2 She-Hulks in your hand from the Moon Girl on 4, or you're just looking for some reinforcement because you got a nice card from the Mirage drop and you're going to want to play the Victoria Hand as just a simple +2. So you're targeting your Sunspot and your Collector to be your early drops, then ramping a bunch of cards into your hand and a bunch of points into your hand, followed by a large turn 6. I love this idea, and Victoria Hand is probably one of the most meta relevant at the time of this video. So I'd say this is a really good target deck for a lot of new players as they start their first ever tournament journey. I really like this list. I think it's very approachable, and I mean, Juggernaut is Juggernaut, so it can't be that bad, right? Then we look at a whole nother direction from Roram, who won the second Golden Gauntlet tournament. His restriction went even further down. He went to a Madam Web move deck. Now, move deck, it is, let's be honest here, a little bit more complicated. It is, for a newer player, a deck that I always recommend for Series 2 because it really helps you to understand your reveal order and the importance of factoring in the next move ahead, the next move ahead. If you can master it though, Madam Web is such an important card for this archetype in this basic, what we'll call Heimdall style move deck. It doesn't have the bounce mechanics in there like you see in some of the more advanced builds. This is a pretty straightforward, I'm going to ramp more points than you via mechanics like my Human Torch. I'm going to interfere with you with my Juggernaut and my Cosmo, but you never know what my turn 6 is going to be because you're always going to be asking yourself the question as the opponent, do they Heimdall or do they not? It's one of the scariest things about this deck is the constant second guessing of did they set up for a Heimdall or not? So I like this as a general move deck, and Madam Web is a key component to it 1000%. I really like this idea from Roram. I went over and started to ask a couple of creators as well that I know have been very regularly competitive in the Golden Gauntlet tournaments. Aoi, a French creator, came forward with, well, I mean, it's Patriot. It's a straightforward Patriot list, but I think there's an undersell for how approachable it actually is because there are no Series 5 cards whatsoever. It is exclusively Iron Lad, who is a Series 4. Now, that's only 3,000 tokens, and when you're first starting, it's great because it's a cheaper option. And a lot of these cards are a lot more approachable. So sure, you're gonna have to end up pulling the Patriot and Mystique to make this deck truly work, but if you end up with that combo, the consistency of this deck is one of the strongest things about it. It has this constant amount of power that is able to either be randomly hidden behind the Invisible Woman because you never know, is it going to be the Blue Marvel in Onslaught, or are you surprising them with an Ultron on turn 6, hiding behind that Invisible Woman? But either way, it is a large amount of power that can ramp onto the board on the very final turn, whether it's the Onslaught or the Ultron, or if finally you're staying under the realm of Shang-Chi and Enchantress and all of these other tech cards, and then go with a Patriot Mystique on turn 6 also. Very approachable deck, little more linear, I think is a good way to word it, but I do like the idea of, once again, you can see there's a pattern here emerging. The creators and the competitors all really like Cosmo as a Series 1 card. If you're just starting the game, you've probably realized how powerful it already is. And as they say, and now for something completely different. Bronix. This is from Binks. It is a Ronin Supergiant deck, and it is completely the opposite direction from every possible other deck on this list. However, at the time of this recording in August, this is probably the most meta-relevant deck because of Supergiant, the only Series 4 or 5 card in here. Right now, we're going through a very large meta at the time of the recording of Invisible Woman First Steps just first came out, and there's a lot of these chaotic decks with Havoc and Marvel Boy and Thena, and Supergiant absolutely ruins all of them. I love how this deck is set up because you can set it up a couple of different ways by using Supergiant on 4. You could be hiding a Mystique behind it on 5, so that way your final turn is Ronin into the end of game, which would be Mystique. This is playing around the end of game mechanic as well, because the ongoings cannot be disabled in that sense because they're hiding behind Supergiant because they're unrevealed. So they're picking up that ability after turn 6. Therefore, it can't be Enchantress or Rogued or destroyed in that sense. I really enjoy that about this deck. And there's a load of power. You got a 2/6 Lizard, you got a 2/6 Maximus. You get the idea of throw a lot of power onto the board. And even Mr. Fantastic is a 3/7 in total that a lot of people forget about because they're so enamored by the First Steps variation of him. Throw a Storm down bright and early, sneak some extra power in there, and hide behind the shadow of Supergiant. It is a very strong deck, and I think with Shadow King needing to be in more decks right now at this time, and let's be honest, in general in Marvel Snap, I think this one absolutely, well, will take down most of the meta. Unless if you run something like this. It's a whole nother direction. Husky Puppies, one of our casters in the first qualifier for Golden Gauntlet, with a straightforward Cerebro 3 deck. But he put himself to a further challenge that I did not ask of him, which was to make the entire thing Series 3 and lower. There are zero Series 4 and 5 cards. This is approachable if you unlock Cerebro. If you get that Cerebro, this deck can control so much of the board. There's nothing more fun, in my opinion, than juking out your own magic because your opponent never, ever expects that to happen. And then you've got location control with Quake. So you've got the full board at your disposal. And I said it in a past video as well, that locations are the 13th card of Snap. You have 3 different ways to control them all by yourself built into the deck. And Quake and Scarlet Witch also have the luxury of being able to be built up by Cerebro because it is a Cerebro 3. Magic, sure, it might be able to get it if it gets basted, but either way, there's a lot of unpredictable power. And look, the good old boy is back. I think that if you're gonna take a chance on a Cerebro deck right now, this is a good one to start off with. I can make a case for Cerebro 2 as well, maybe even Cerebro 4, but that's just because I like memes. Going the other direction though, complete opposite other direction though. Safety Blade has come forward with Sarah No Sarah. He swiped this idea away on basically building a tech deck that can hide behind Invisible Woman and allow that to be the final play that lets chaos happen in turn. You don't need to have Sarah to run Sarah Tech. You just need Tech. And that's what this deck is doing. Now, to that same accord, if you're an experienced card gamer and you're comfortable with this style of deck, I would then promote it. But for a brand new player, I'm a little scared of this deck because there's a lot of very key decisions that need to be made, and it's almost always reactive. Getting a read on your opponent, if you're confident in being able to do that, this deck is incredibly solid. But if you're a brand new player and you're still learning the main mechanics of the game, a deck like the Patriot deck might be a little bit more up your alley. However, the ceiling on this deck for control via the high power from Blizzard, the unknown from Cable, lane control with Juggernaut, and destruction that comes out of Killmonger and Shang-Chi, I think that this is an incredibly solid deck for a brand new player as well. But I will give the asterisk that it is a much harder deck to run because you have to play your priority in your favor. So be careful with that if you do run this deck, but this is a very strong tech-focused deck that can counter a lot of pieces of the meta right now. KM Best. This might look a little familiar. You might see Moon Girl and She-Hulk, and you go, wait a minute, we had this earlier with Derek, but it's a slightly different approach. Derek ran with a Victoria Hand style. KM Best went straight up, I'm going to throw a ridiculous amount of points at you style. He's got the Hawkeye in there. The Titania is in there. The Nakia is in there. Very under-respected card once you start leaving Series 2. But when you are just starting the game and you only have certain pieces, you're looking for every ounce of power you can get. So by Nakia-ing your hand and then going on further with Moon Girl to get those cards doubled, you're actually furthering the value of that card as well, and it's very under-respected. But wait for that final turn. You got the Quinjet down, you got an Ant-Man, Nakia, cheap She-Hulks, maybe a Sunspot to boot, and then, yeah, throw a Hitmonkey in there just for kicks. That's a lot of unpredictable power. That's the strength of this kind of a deck. It's exclusively about, look, you know I have a lot of power, and it could be ranging. It could be tech via Shadow King. It could be crazy scale points because of a Hitmonkey, or just one beefy She-Hulk, maybe even two beefy She-Hulks in the same lane on the final turn because they were 0-10s or 1-10s. It's a lot of power. The challenge of a deck like this is reservation, not just immediately throwing everything out there. You got to be really disciplined and really understand where your opponent is looking to put their power, because you're going to want to find one weakness, as in a lane that they're not focusing on, and then you need to really be able to scale on that final turn over in what is going to be your competitive lane, more competitive lane. Very solid deck to start. Be careful with your order in Titania specifically, because obviously she'll be flipping back and forth on the board. But if you need to drop something early on turn 1, Quinjet, Iceman, Sunspot, those are going to be your best friends. Hawkeye, kind of flex him a little bit earlier in the middle because his effect obviously isn't as strong on the final turn because it needs the next turn after it. Very strong build from KM Best and very approachable as well. Other direction, Sko. He's a writer for Snap.fan, and I've really enjoyed his deck builds over the last couple of months, looking at his articles, and I tasked him with the same thing. So this is what I'm calling Wiccan.fan, in honor of the site he works on. And it is a Wiccan build, which is your only Series 5 card in this deck. And Wiccan, it's such a target card. So many creators and players are going to say if you have to specifically target one Series 4 or 5 early on, they're going to recommend Wiccan because energy is good. Energy is almost always really, really good to have. So let's build a strong 4-drop style deck that allows you the ability to put a ridiculous amount of control and points on turns 5 and 6. And that's what this deck is doing, because you're always going to open with Quicksilver and you're always going to draw Domino on turn 2. That then leaves you exclusively needing to find either Storm, Juggernaut, or Killmonger. In that sense, every single game with 3/3 drops and a guaranteed Quicksilver and Domino draw, it's more than a 50% chance that you'll draw Storm, Juggernaut, or Killmonger by turn 3, leading into one of the 5 4-drops on turn 4. Ideally, of course, Wiccan. So Zabu, of course, really going to be helping out. Zabu, now that he's dropped down to Series 3, is a lot more approachable for many players, and he's one of the cards you hope to get very early on in your Series 3 journey. But if you're going to target and use those collector's tokens, I mean, Wiccan's a great call here. The Power Magneto constantly gets under-respected, as we talked about earlier with locking down lanes with Juggernaut. But in a Storm deck, just be careful that you're not overcommitting the wrong way. You could be knocking something into a storm lane. So be careful if you want that to be happening intentionally or not. Lastly is a variation on what Lauren Whatevs has called mostly sub series 3. So the earliest of earliest possible decks with some chaos kind of sprinkled in there just for fun, I think is the best way to word it, because you've got a Ravonna in here. That's your series 4 option. But most of the cards here you get incredibly early. I think Electra is one of those cards that people just don't respect anymore, and people have called for a variety of different variations of reworking Electra. It's such a legendary character. But as a destroyer of 1-drops in a tournament where you're probably going to see strong decks like Thanos, you're probably going to see Marvel Boy and Zoo decks. We showed some of them earlier with Patriot. Electra has a lot more value than just being a 1/2. You got to look at the full value of not just her body, but how much she removes in exchange. If it's removing a Titania, that makes Electra a total of a 1/7, and you can't sleep on that. But the goal of this deck is reduce down the Ironheart, the Morph, the Jubilee, and the White Tiger. Get that all into a lane that can help build unpredictable power. Jubilee, you don't know what it's going to get drawn out of the deck. Morph, you don't know what it's going to turn into in the deck. The White Tiger, you don't know where the Tiger Spirit is going to land on the board. That unpredictability, as long as you learn how to mitigate that RNG, can play to your benefit. Otherwise, you're just ending up with a ridiculous amount of power because you played Wong into White Tiger into Odin and just put Tiger Spirits all over the board in the other 2 lanes and said, here, go ahead, get at least 32 in all of these other lanes. I challenge you to do so. 32 is a pretty large number for a lot of styles of deck that are not prepared to handle them. The Shang-Chi deck sits underneath it, for example. So keep an eye on that. I like this style of build because it's just Ravonna you need to target. Everything else you got much, much earlier. And some of these cards you probably wouldn't even immediately consider, but a 2/5, that's really good stats. Sure, you could substitute it out, but why would you do that when you got a Wong that you could work with, pause, for Medusa and turn that into a 2/8 on the final turn? That's what you want to aim for. I really do think this is a strong deck and a kind of the sleeper, which is why I put it towards the end here. So Lauren Whatevs coming in with the mostly sub series 3 style deck of just making on reveal chaos go crazy. So there you go. Some of the top creators, some of the top competitors, and former champions of the Marvel Snap Golden Gauntlet series have come forward and spoken and tried to help you, whether you're a brand new player or a player that's been here for a very long time, like yours truly. Look, we want everyone to enjoy the Golden Gauntlet series, and we think that it's important that new players have an opportunity to do so. But that doesn't mean that this whole list was for exclusively new players. If you have parts and pieces, but you can't build every meta deck, maybe there's something in here that's shown out for you, but you've been playing for a year or a year and a half or 2 years, and you're taking your time. That's the journey of Marvel Snap, and I hope you all enjoy it and tune in and enjoy the entire Golden Gauntlet World Championship Series. Information in the description down below. It's that area right below where you hit the like and subscribe thing. It's right underneath it. So, and underneath that's the area where you put comments and tell us, you know, what was your favorite? What deck are you bringing to a tournament? What deck should I have put in here? How would you do it differently? All that kind of fun stuff, or even emojis. That's good too. But either way, you get the drill. See you next time.